Hello, welcome to The Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and in this video, we're going to be looking at the stats for Age of Sigmar. But most importantly, we're going to be covering everything that happened in the battle scroll that just ended. And we're also going to be comparing that in part to the battle scroll that ended in December. Now, it's not very often that I get to do this, and thank you to Warhammer Rob for producing all that information for me, because this is going to give us a really good insight into how this game develops over time. Pretty useful for new players, pretty useful for people who are in the hobby and maybe are thinking about collecting armies, because I think there's some really relevant data which will maybe inform your painting, your buying, and everything else that you think about the game. Let's dive straight in and look at all the information, shall we? So at the end of this battle scrolls are quarterly updates that Games Workshop makes to Age of Winmar. Sorry, I'm just trying to have some fun with it. And you can see that Rob has taken results from 34 countries. Here you can see our world map, which is cool. Include events from a bunch of different places. We have 96 events because we do 2-day events. We don't take in 1-day events. And the reason is, in my opinion, is 1-day events don't give you enough skill expression to really start to understand how armies work. We have over 3,600 players, which we've had playing over the past 3 months. So that means 3,600 players currently active in the past 3 months of Age of Sigmar, which is kind of a good pool of people. That's 2-day events. So if you add 1-day events, that number goes up. If you add people just playing at your local club who don't really attend events, that number drastically goes up. So there's a lot of people playing this game. I'd like to say probably from the competitive to casual, it's probably something like 10,000 people. I think that's about right. We have added 2 new countries over the past 3 months. Both Slovenia and Turkey have been added, which is cool. And we've got over 9,000 games have been played. So we have a very international community, which is fun. Shout out to Bolivia. We've got people playing in China, Indonesia, Australia. We're all over the place, right? Which is very, very cool. Right, okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at, normally you start straight off with either meta rep or you start off with the big ticket item, the thing everyone screen caps, which is the win rate for each army. But as I've done, and if you've looked at any of the other shows that I've done on this, I think I'm one of the people who's probably the only, I don't know. I've covered stats for Age of Sigmar a lot, but also stats for Wargaming a lot. So I feel like I got a lot of insight. This is a really interesting graph here. Everyone screen caps win rate because it's like the big ticket item. They're like, oh, mine's low, oh, mine's high, and then they don't have any context about it. This show is basically context, or my context, or what I think. This graph is super interesting because this is meta rep over time. Now, one of the things that we've been talking about, because I'm streaming right now, before I started recording, is that there is a certain section of players who jump between armies when those armies are good. When you play an event or when you're playing competitive Age of Sigmar, what you really want to do is you want to play the armies that give you the best potential or the best chance of winning a game. A good example would be, if we go look at this graph here, this is the positive win rate potential, which is something I talk about a lot, which is the number of games that you'll play and the likelihood or what did happen, the amount of people who played with an army and they had more wins than losses. And as you can see, Flesh Eater Courts, who have the highest win rate, also have the highest positive win rate potential, 64%. So, 64% of the people who played got 3-2 or better with their army. This number has been much higher in the past with some other armies, but it's nice and high for Flesh Eater Courts. So if I was looking to play an event this weekend, I'd say to myself, I might play Flesh Eater Courts. Now, there might be like a hard counter to Flesh Eater Courts. I guess that doesn't really work in Age of Sigmar. There's not like a strength and toughness thing like you'd find in something like the Old World as an example. But sometimes there is, something that could shut down a magic phase or something that could turn off healing or whatever it might be. So there might be sometimes a direct counter, but Flesh Eater Courts will give you the best chance of winning. Sons of Behemoth will give you a great chance of winning, even if that's just winning 3 games. But you obviously want to get that mythical 5-0. And as you can see here, the most factions with the most 5-0 results, I'm kind of blocking it out, that's what the star means, are Flesh Eater Courts, Slaves to Darkness, and Stormcast Eternals. Now, their positive win rate potential is below here, and their win rate's only 50%. But the reason they've got a lot of 5-0s is actually because the high skill expression players who are generally just a bit better, right? Is a smaller amount of people, but they're playing in a pool of some of the most people. In fact, actually, that's Deepkin. So Deepkin is a different conversation. I'm not even going to edit this out. I said that wrong. Stormcast still have a lot of 5-0s. I've covered them already over the past 3 months. But Deepkin is a small player pool, all of highly skilled players, because Deepkin is like a random choice. If we look at hold on. If we look at meta rep, you can see it here. I'm definitely messing this up now. But if you look at meta rep, you can see down at the bottom that Fire Slayers are not particularly popular, right? Their win rate's also fairly low. But with Deepkin as an example, and I'm trying to compare them to Fire Slayers, if Fire Slayers were as good as Deepkin, then you would swap those numbers around. It's not much of a switch between Fire Slayers at 1.8 and Deepkin at 2.9, but all of the Fire Slayers players, all of the players who could see the potential to win with Fire Slayers would jump between them. Does that make sense? And then the meta rep for Idoneth would just drop down immediately. So it's by a random choice. I mean, it's not randomly chosen, but they're specifically choosing them because they're strong, which is what the main point of my first slide is meant to be here. Yeah, yeah. I am absolutely just messing it up. But I do have jet lag. So here we go. And there's a lot of data to go through. Our example here, if you go look at the top right, is Flesh Eater Courts, right? So Flesh Eater Courts in December got a massive boost to the battle scroll, from the battle scroll, making them much more effective. And you can see their meta representation, that graph at the top right-hand side is not their win rate, it's how many people started to play them. More people played them when they got better. Okay, now a lot of people will call these like meta chasers. That's one of the things that kind of like an insulting term that gets thrown around. Obviously, that's a dumb thing to say. If you're playing in a tournament and the goal is to win, I guess it's like driving a car. Like in the F1 or in racing, you try and get the fastest car because it helps you win, right? Sure, driver skill is important, but you try and get the best car to win the race. Get the best horse. To run a race, you get the best shoes if you're running, whatever your example needs to be, you give yourself the best opportunity to do well, right? So calling people meta chasers as an insult is obviously super, super dumb. Right, so yeah, Flesh Eater Courts, and you can see you'll see the win rate. They're the highest win rate army currently in the game. This really is a bit jarring. I apologize. Please do leave in the comments if you think I've done a terrible job, or maybe I've done a good job. Who knows? Anyway, Iron Jaws, you can see since their book came out, also have become more popular, as you can see here, which is very important. Stormcast Eternals, which I'm kind of blocking just down the bottom here, they are the most popular as well, but they have started to slowly drop off after February. That's probably because people thought that they would be taking a big nerf in the battle scroll that just happened, but they didn't. So that's fun. Another good one to look at, if I can find it, is going to be Sons of Behemoth, just down here. Okay, so Sons of Behemoth, their meta rep has also started to increase as well, since we got the Prized Beast new update in the last battle scroll, and their win rate has also changed as well. So there's something to be said about an army doing well or not doing well based on players who are also good jumping between armies and artificially increasing those numbers. A good example would look OCR Bone Reapers. They were super strong, right? And then the meta rep dropped off. Their win rate has also dropped off. But when their meta rate dropped off, this is a bunch of the people that play in the army because it's good. Now we've got a bunch of people who play in the army because they just like it. Gloomspike Gitz is also, I think, a similar example. I'm going to try and find that for you somewhere around here. Somewhere. Gloomspike Gitz, yes, you can see fairly frenetic. You saw October, November, they were very strong. December, they got dropped a little bit, and then they've kind of maintained. But this is people just moving away from them, probably moving to something like Slaves to Darkness, which is just stronger. So I think this gives you, and is a good conversation piece, that when you start looking at win rates, when you start looking at a bunch of different stuff in this game, you have to remember that there's a certain population of players who jump between armies, especially those armies that are much stronger, because it's going to give them the best opportunity to win a game. Right, so this is what the game looked like. So the other conversation to have about stats this week, I think, or this month or this quarter, is how the game is pretty schizophrenic. Like it has a big variance and isn't overtly stable unless you're kind of in the middle. So these are the win rates at the end of December. Nighthorn at a 59% win rate, Disciple Zinch at 58. Then if we look at the bottom, we got Sons of Behemoth, Firestayers, Hedonite Success, Soulblight Gravelords, Maggotkin, and Iron Jaws and Seraphon. Now, Seraphon, we know, got a big update as well. Sons of Behemoth got that update I just discussed. But importantly, Nighthorn at the top, Bone Reapers at the top. Okay, now let's go look at what... So if we look at, the stats for now, we can see that Flesh Eater Courts are at the top. Our comparison is that Flesh Eater Courts was kind of around here, 47%. Now they are very, very good. But our Nighthorn of previous are now straight at the bottom. Yes, straight at the bottom with, and then our Sons of Behemoth at the bottom are now third from the top. That's a pretty big switch. Now, is it because Games Workshop makes massive changes? Not really. In Flesh Eater Courts and Croak's case and Seraphon's case, yes. But actually, it's because the game doesn't have a ton of variance when it comes to building lists and strategy for a bunch of different reasons, but mainly because units aren't really very identifiable because they don't have a lot of abilities or nuance between them. Normally and often, it's a stat check based on points. I could expand more on that, but if you've got any questions, please do leave them in the comments. Another good example, if we look over here, thanks to Rob, again, just for providing this for me. This is a bit of a dirty chart, but you can see the very few of the armies have had a stable translation. Okay, Soulblight Gravelords, they're just getting a new book. Blades of Corn have had a stable translation. Cities of Sigmar, and then also Stormcast Eternals, right? And Stormcast Eternals and Cities of Sigmar are interesting because in Cities of Sigmar case, the population of people playing them is actually really slim. But in Stormcast Eternals case, the population of people playing them is very, very high. Okay, so it just means that the high skill player base jumping between armies hasn't been able to move that. However, that is pretty wild. I don't know if that's positive or negative. I'm just trying to I'm just trying to like talk about it, and I'm going to ask myself, what do I think about it? That feels pretty frenetic to me. That's quite a drastic switch between some of these armies. Some aren't quite as bad, like Zinch go from 62 to 50, but it does feel like pretty severe in some cases, right? So as an interesting conversation definitely to be having. Please do have them in the comments. Let me know what you think. But I think that's an interesting one. But then, so then the win rates now at the end of the last battle scroll, leading to the battle scroll, which I covered on the battle scroll video, but just to remind ourselves, Flesh Eater Courts at 59. Some people said I was blowing it over the top, that was egregious. Sure. You know, it's only 4% over what we like to think is the Goldilocks chain. I will remind people that the 45 to 55% kind of bracket that lots of people discuss nowadays originally something that me and LLV kind of came up with like 7 years ago for AOS because we just wanted some sort of range to try to bully Games Workshop into. Originally, it was actually 60 and 40, and then we bullied them down to 45 and 55. So in the future, let's bully them down to 52.5, 47.5, right? That seems to be good. And if you look at other types of like competitive games or even sports, that's actually an egregious number. But you know, wargamers are wargamers, and you don't know anything outside of the wargaming circle often. Anyway, this is what it looks. And who's doing badly? Cruel Boys. That sucks. They definitely need some help. Didn't get it in the battle scroll. They're going to continue to suck until the summer comes along. Nighthaunt, Skaven, Soulblight Gravelords, Gloomspite Gits, and OCR Bone Reapers. I actually think you can do really well with Gloomspite Gits. Still, Soulblight Gravelords are about to get a book. Skaven did just take a nerf, but I still think you could do well with it. Their Storm Fiends build did a nerf, got nerfed, but I think you can still do quite a lot with it as well. Loads of armies in the middle pack, which you're going to be happy about. And then Sons of Behemoth, sadly at the top. Slaves to Darkness, Idoneth, Deepkin. Deepkin didn't get touched. So with Flesh Eater Courts getting hit and Slaves to Darkness getting hit, then it's really the time of Deepkin and Sons of Behemoth to shine, really. Seraphon got a little bit of a points increase as well, but probably won't make any difference. So your top armies right now are going to be Deepkin, Sons of Behemoth, but your sleeper good armies are actually Stormcast Eternals in this mid-pack, who didn't take any nerfs and actually consistently hit the 5-0, and as we're about to see, are even more popular than they were, 11.6% of the meta. Previously in AOS 4.1, to the end of December, they were 10.9% of the meta, and Slaves of Darkness were 8.9. That's actually increased to 11.6 and 10.3. So as we've said previously, about 22% of the meta is all, high armor save dudes, which is elite. However, Seraphon, 6.4% is a big change. They obviously got that update. They've gone up like a couple of percentage points. Gits and Bone Reapers have dropped down, but they're traditionally popular anyway because they're just very cool armies to play. At the bottom, obviously, is Beast of Chaos Bone Splitters, who soon will be legend into the summer. I'm pretty certain I've decided I'm just going to let them play until they're unplayable at my events anyway, because, I mean, I'm not a bootlick. I don't can't get rid of my mate's army. It seems silly. So that's the meta rep, and I think this is fairly indicative of both win rates and generally army popularity. I think Kharadron Overlords have got an amazing aesthetic and they're super cool, but they're never an army I suggest to a new player, as they're fairly one note. They don't engage in the magic phase. They can engage in the combat phase, but it's fairly fragile, and generally, they're not that popular. Whereas if you just jump up to Skaven and Gloomspike Gits, they're just popular, thematic, aesthetically pleasing armies, which very many people love and have loved for a long time. They're also like Tolkien-esque, I guess, not Skaven really, but the Gits for sure. And I think people, obviously just love a goblin. They love a goblin. It's very, very, very popular. Then if we go look at our T-Wip ratio, I hate explaining this, but very quickly, if you lose the first game and then win the rest, or win all your games and lose the last, if you win all your games and lose the last, your T-Wip will be higher than if you lose the first game and then win the rest, because it's about having to fight more difficult opponents over time. Deepkin are absolutely huge, really low meta representation, high skill expression players. Flesh Eater Courts are also up there because they are very good with lots of people playing them. But then we get real low. Maggotkin and Nurgle got a pretty bad T-Wip. And also another interesting point is Sons of Behemoth, which I covered yesterday, because their T-Wip is low, very, very low. So what that means is they normally lose one of the first two games, but they win the rest of the games. So they hit that 4-1 section, which gives them their high win rate. Also, they'll probably have a pretty solid 3-2, which has always been a traditional sign that Sons of Behemoth are starting to become a problem. Because if they can just consistently, because you don't have a lot of skill expression with Sons, you just push them on the circles. If you push them on the circles and if you get 3 wins out of 2, then you're doing great. So that's interesting. Both Kharadron Overlords and Cruel Boys have not gone 4-0 last battle scroll. So that's why these two at the bottom have got a 0, Kharadron Overlords and Cruel Boys. They have never gone 4-0. If that makes sense. So they never hit the T-Wip mark. It's pretty rough. Then you got the win rates over time. Here you can see Flesh Eater Courts at the top right-hand corner, kind of the hot topic at the moment. Sons of Behemoth have had an incredible rise. You can see at the bottom left here, bottom middle. They've had a big spike up, and then they've continued now. Again, that was in that December Battle Scroll update, and that's continued. Maggotkin and Nurgle definitely jumped around as people either play it or don't play it. It's got a very good win con. Just a bunch of Blight Kings, but it's also pretty dry because it's just a bunch of Blight Kings. I don't really understand why people don't mind playing Nurgle. Like, I guess you got to paint more Nurgle than you got to paint Sons. I guess that's the simple answer. It's the same win con. Just bore the opponent to death. And that's it for the stats this month. I don't want to deep dive all of the pieces of information because there really isn't too much change on the state of the game from the most recent battle scroll. So apart from Flesh Eater Courts being hammered, and I've kind of covered that I think Deepkin will be fairly ascendant, although there'll be a low meta rep. So probably you'll see Stormcast be ascendant as well. I think that'll be the interesting point. But the conversation I'd like to leave everyone with, at least in today's video, is two things. One, and I'd like to know what you think. That's also true. I want to know what you think. how high skill expression players jumping between armies will manipulate, not intentionally, like they're not doing it on purpose, unless they all get together and they all start to play like a single army, which I think would be very funny. Like everyone just plays Sinesh Bowman now. Then they get them nerfed unnecessarily, which I think is very fun. And then, and the other conversation about how frenetic the game is and how kind of wild and diverse this game system is on over a 3-month period, which I think is kind of, I guess a lot of people can take this as a negative, right? I think, like your fortunes, I just paint up my, Ogre More Tribes army, and all of a sudden it's top of the pops. But last week, it might, like last month or 3 months ago, sorry, it was at the bottom. I think a lot of people will take that as a negative, and I can kind of see why, for sure. I'm not trying to point out that is a positive or negative. I think generally people would like small incremental changes that don't have a massive impact. I guess our question is why do small incremental changes have a massive impact? What is it in the game design that creates that situation? And is actually some of that just players moving around as well? That's a great convo. Either way, let me know what you think. Thanks to Warhammer Rob for providing the data, because it is fascinating and it's always really interesting to talk about. I apologize for just being a bit of a mess today. Jet lag from coming back from Adepticon, but loads of love. I appreciate you. If you enjoy what I do, please support me on Patreon because I need to go to sleep. And I'll see you soon. Bye.